I find it amazing that the majority of the things that we run into in life actually stem from our childhood trauma experiences. It doesn't matter whether you have big T trauma or little t trauma. It doesn't matter whether you feel like your childhood was awful or if you felt like your childhood was great. The reality is the experiences we have in those first 7 to 25 years of life, the time before our prefrontal cortex is completely formed, we are actually storing the experiences we have deep in the cells of our body. We all know this, right? Like data nowadays, Bessel van der Kolk, Peter Levine, everyone's doing a really beautiful job of helping us understand that the deep experiences we have early in our childhood actually affect the way we think, the way we feel emotionally, the way we behave, our personality. It affects what we feel spiritually, energetically, physically. We know that these emotional blockages that we have from childhood actually get stored in the body, right? The mental health world has started to establish that. However, there is not one system out there that explains, since it's stored in the body, how do we get out? How do we get it out of the body? How do we change these belief systems, these thoughts, these emotions? There's hardly any information, repeatable systems out there until this work that we've done in my inner alignment organization. What we have done is we just assumed, yes, it's stored in there. There are these frozen experiences left over from childhood that get frozen in our body. Our child experience gets like really locked in there. And then for the next 40 years, we're thinking I'm not good enough, or men aren't safe, or I need to protect myself, right? There are all of these thoughts and emotions and behavioral patterns that we get into and continue to repeat. And from that point, we wire up our entire brain, nervous system, body chemistry to those seed experiences. So my name is Kim Beekman. I am the author of the Inner Alignment Soul Retrieval for Healing Childhood Trauma book. And this book was written based on many years of developing a system to get into the body to be able to work those seed experiences. I have done thousands of sessions and worked with hundreds of people to be able to get to that space in what we call the trauma packet, that packet of energy, that frozen 6-year-old experience when dad hit you that first time, or when the teacher embarrassed you in front of the entire class. What we found is that these experiences will reverberate and form your entire life view. And from that, you will find yourself married, playing out the same behavioral patterns that were formed from these core trauma packets that were stored at a very young age. Before you knew better, before you figured out how the world worked, it actually formed how you figured out how the world worked. And so these trauma packets stored in the body have with them thoughts about what's good, what's bad, what's safe, what's not. It has emotions, fear, death fear, like the fear that we're going to die, right? It has energetic patterns connected to it. It has spiritual beliefs and connection or disconnection. It has body sensations. Every layer of the body lives and operates from these vibrations that are stored beyond the conscious mind in the body. And then it dictates everything. It dictates how we feel, how we think, how we love, how we relate, whether we feel safe, whether we feel connected, whether we feel strong, whether we feel like we're seen, whether we have truth. It affects everything. So if you are struggling with issues in your marriage, or if you're battling up against your boss, or if you are struggling with your feelings about yourself, or if you feel like you just don't feel worthy enough or valuable enough or lovable enough, if you feel unseen, unheard, these are old remnants. And no matter how many Wayne Dyer books you read, no matter how many self-healing sessions, no matter how much mindfulness, how much meditation or yoga that you do, that's great. But these trauma packets are like a fire in the basement of the house, blowing up smoke to the upper floors. And all of those beautiful modalities that I just mentioned are like just things that we help blow smoke out of the upper floors, right? They just give us a chance to breathe or to feel good temporarily, but eventually the smoke will build up again, right? Why? The smoke builds up again because we never put out the fire of these trauma packets that are living in the body and literally dictating everything we think, we feel. They come on as vibrations, but we're not aware of that. We're just calling it depression, or we just say we have anxiety, right? So we put these umbrella labels over these deeply embedded vibrations that make us feel like we're going to die. There's death fear in there. Why? Because at the moment when dad hit me the first time, or when the teacher made fun of me in front of the classroom, that parent is there to protect me and is now hurting me. So I fear death. That teacher is there to teach me and to hold me in community, right? So if she's making fun of me in the front of the classroom, I'm going to get kicked out of the pack. That feels like death. So those experiences reverberate through us and dictate 90% of the decisions we make in life. They dictate all of the conflicts that we have. They dictate how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about the other people in our lives. So don't you think it's time that we actually start working where the fire is, rather than through therapy, which is super important, but therapy only works by sitting on the top of the house and looking down and saying, there's some smoke, there's some fire, we got a problem here. Let's figure out the problem. It happens from the mental body, from the mind, but that's not where the trauma is. The trauma is deeply embedded in the body. The trauma is screaming through our body. And no matter how we figure things out with our mind, that fire will always be there. And that's what we find, right? Decades upon decades upon decades of repeating the same patterns, even if we know better. Why? Because those decisions, those patterns are coming from those deep vibrations. We're not like sitting there like, I'm going to sabotage this relationship. I think I'm going to just smash it down because I'm not lovable. It doesn't come from that place. It comes from a place of deep feeling like I'm unlovable. And then the behavior just stems out of that. Does that make sense? So if you feel like you've been repeating the same patterns over and over again, and you've studied everything and you've therapized it to death, then what's next is getting underneath that issue. What's next is digging into the space deep, deep within yourself to be able to unlock those vibrations that have just been there on autopilot for a long, long time. We call that process inner alignment soul retrieval. But really what it is going into a deep dimension of your consciousness, which lives really close to the body, and being able to rework that vibration such that these higher vibrations of love and freedom and deep connection and care and feeling nourished and nurtured, all of those things that experience didn't have. By working with those pieces, you can actually start to feel like your needs are met. So you stop looking for love in all the wrong places. Does that make sense? So that's the underlying piece, is that I'm not loved, I'm not worthy, I'm not good, I'm not safe, I'm not seen. That all lives in this experience, in this trauma packet. And we will continue to repeat these patterns so long as it still lives there. So how do you fix it? Everybody says, well, how do I heal that? How do I fix it? It's actually really easy to fix if you're working at it in the right space. So we work with current life triggers, current issues that are coming up and showing up in life, because that's where our trauma is playing out, right? Right here, front stage, front center. And then we take those vibrations into the body. And once we get into the body knows, the body keeps the score, right? The body knows exactly what that issue is. And so when we can enter into the trauma packet through the actual physical body sensations, those sensations that you've been wishing would go away, you're calling them panic, or you're calling it depression, or you're calling it sad and heavy. But really, those sensations are the indicator of where the problem is. And so when we follow down into that space and start to bring those more nurturing, loving vibrations into that space, then we can work with that point of origin or the root cause. When we do that and actually work every layer of the body in that space, because the past is living in the present, because the body is feeling the past, reliving itself in the present moment, we can then, after that's healed, come back up to this current life issue with your spouse and see if it's still triggering. Most of the time it's not. And that's great. To do that is absolutely critical. But what you saw in my book, if you had a chance to read it, is that's not all. To rewire and rework in the trauma packet is absolutely critical. But that work doesn't stop there. That has to be done consistently to work with the neuroscience of healing. And what we know about the neuroscience of healing is this. It takes 40 to 60 days to change the neurosynaptic wiring in the brain. And so if we have that aha and we feel loved and we feel worthy of love and we're good. When we anchor that in, new neural pathways, new connections are happening within the brain, which is awesome, right? But if within a week we don't consistently practice those new neural pathways, they'll truncate. They'll go away. So the actual rewiring of this extraordinary experience now that lives in the body needs to be wired every single day at the physical body, at the emotional, at the thought level, at the energetic level, and in terms of building awareness and spiritual connection. Every layer of the self needs to integrate this new experience so that it can be wired into the brain and body. Once it's wired into the neurosynaptic patterns, the new neurotransmitter and new hormones are going to be excreted. Not depression hormones, not anxiety hormones, but like happy hormones, love hormones, right? But then it takes 2 months for the cells in the body to create the capacity to sustain, to receive. The neurotransmitter receptors take 2 months to change within the cells of the body. So you have to bombard the neurotransmitter receptors for 2 months in order for them to really maintain the capacity to be able to sustain happy. That's crazy, right? So based on that, you need to go into the trauma packet and work it at the roots. You have to rewire every layer of yourself to be able to sustain that for at least 2 months. And it needs to be done in the space of love. You need to be held in a container of love. That sounds very squishy. But most of us didn't get that secure attachment as a child. Most of us were not held in a really nourishing, nurturing family. Most of us didn't have a secure attachment. And so if we're going to build secure attachment in ourselves, we need to be provided with a secure attachment. Not one that's sterile and boundaried, one that's love, like real love, practical love, love in action. And that's the third part of healing. So all of this is outlined here in my book in probably painful amounts of detail, because I go through the physical body and the brain wiring. I go through the thoughts and belief systems and what that takes to change. I go through the emotional aspects and the pain body, as Eckhart Tolle has taught us. We talk about what it is to build awareness within ourselves, to be the witness of this experience, and what it is to reconnect ourselves to this earth and to divine source within the context of our hearts. You cannot heal childhood trauma, in my opinion, without healing the spiritual connection within ourselves and outside of ourselves. The spiritual body cannot be left out. It doesn't have to be all woo-woo. It can be really straightforward, which is about your heart. It doesn't have to be about the G word God, or it doesn't have to be like super weird, which a lot of people who have been on the mental health path are like, nope. But there does need to be an openness that there is this eternal, amazing soul essence within me that's going to drive this healing process, because my ego mind was kind of screwing it up a little bit. So that's the work. That's what this work is. That's what level 1 work is within my program, the Soul Retrieval for Healing Childhood Trauma. It's about really being able to work deep where the trauma packets live, and to rewire yourself, and to be held in a space where you can heal. All 3 of those pieces are incredibly important.